Hi, this is Mr. Waite, and welcome to the AP Biology Saturday study session for ecology. Hopefully you have printed off your manual that looks like this. That's 2 pages of review. Let me get this squared away here really quickly. Make sure you look at those first 2 pages. We're going to start with these multiple choice questions. Also, make sure you have your equation sheet that looks like this, as we'll need it for this session. All right, let's begin by looking at question number 1. And let's look at what it says. It says here, the transfer of energy through all the different trophic levels. And what I do on this one, as soon as I say that, is I'm going to identify my different trophic levels. I could put something through here that it describes this as the primary, as the producers. The second one, I could even just draw a line right here and say these are my primary consumers. These would be my secondary consumers right inside here, secondary consumers. And then finally my lake trout up here would be my tertiary consumer. Let's go through the different things, but it's ultimately asking us, as it says, there's dead terrestrial plant material, dead plant material was washed into the lake. It produces a toxin. And it says, what are the most likely effects of the toxin on this food web? Let's go down here and look at our possible choices. It says toxins pose a great risk to lake trout. There are tertiary consumers, a greater risk to them than the larvae and the snails, which are down here, because it is a top-level predator. I like that one. Let's come back and see if there's not a better answer. This one says the producers would be negatively affected the most. These guys down here. Now remember the process of biological magnification. We start with a few toxins, they build up more in the next level, more in the next level, and the most in the last. So to say that these guys would be affected the most, I don't like that one. The larvae of aquatic insects would be most impacted because they directly feed on the contaminated plants. So again, it's asking us about the insects. Where are the insects? I guess these guys could be the insects right here, it tells us. And they are affected, but I'm not sure they're the most impacted, so I'm going to cross out C. The sculpin population up here would not be greatly affected because it is smaller than the populations of primary consumers. It is up here, though. In fact, it's greater than the primary consumers. In fact, I would say it would be greatly affected. Get rid of that. So I will go with A on this particular question. Stuff that we're supposed to review on this one is this idea of biological magnification. How we get these toxins accumulating at the top level predators. So that's going to be important to remember for the test. Number 2, we're going to talk about the role of decomposers. And we're talking about net primary production. That's going to be important here in just a little bit. Is an important concept. If you applied a fungicide, so something that's going to kill fungus, to a cornfield, what would you expect happen to the rate of decomposition and the net primary production? Just quick review. Remember what net primary production is. Let me go down to this next slide. Net primary production is, first of all, gross primary production is everything. It's all of the, a good way to say the gross is, it's the sunlight energy that gets converted into chemical energy. It's all that sunlight energy. So it's almost like all of the sun's energy. But not all of that energy gets used for storage. Some of it's going to be used by the plant for this process of respiration. So when we take the respiration out of the equation, that's how we get our net primary production. That's what that one is talking about. Let's go back to here. Okay, so I'm applying a fungicide. What do I think is going to happen now? The other thing I'm going to remember that fungi are usually decomposers. So when I apply the fungicide, I expect the decomposers' decomposition rate to go down. And if I'm applying it to a cornfield, the reason I would be applying it is to hopefully help the corn grow more. So I'd expect more corn or a higher production of corn out of this. So as I go through this one, both the decomposition rate and the net primary production of the corn would increase. That's not what I'm looking for. Both the decomposition rate and the net NPP would decrease. No, neither would change. No, up here it says the decomposition rate would decrease and the net overall net production would increase. So I'm going to go with D for that one. Let's see what we're supposed to review. Again, we already looked at that. The idea of gross is everything. R is the what gets used for respiration of the plant, so what's left over is the net primary production. Let's go on to number 3, and number 3 says if there are 100,000 kilojoules of energy available in the producer level, I'm going to immediately find the producers, which is grass, and these guys are going to have 100,000 kilojoules of energy. Which of the following statements is correct? And what you can look and see here is this idea of energy is flowing one way, and every time how much energy does the next organism or the level get, it just gets 10% of that. So basically I take away 0. So instead of 100,000, I'm going to make this grasshopper is only going to have 10,000%, kilojoules. I'm going to take away another 0 for this one, and this one's going to gets 1,000 kilojoules for this one. And finally, if I take away one last 0, this guy only has 100 kilojoules. If I go through this, grasshoppers would have a maximum of 100,000. No. They would have approximately 1,000. No, that we said 10,000. Shrews would have approximately 1,000 kilojoules. I do like that one. Owls have approximately 10,000 kilojoules, and that's not true either. So that's how we arrive at that question. This was just reviewing the idea of food chains. The 10% rule, don't forget, every time you go up in a level, you lose 10%. The consumer only gains 10% of that overall energy. The question is, what happens to that 90%? Well, don't forget, that's lost in the form of heat or via metabolism some way. It's lost. So 10% rule is a good one to remember for the test. Number 4. Which of the following strategies would most rapidly increase genetic diversity? So we're looking at what is going to increase the genetic diversity of a population that's close to extinction right here. All right, so we're going to keep the ideas of what's going to increase genetic diversity, capturing all the remaining individuals in the population and do a breeding program and reintroduce them. We're still talking about the same genes here, so I'm going to move on from this one, same genes. Next one is to establish a reserve that protects the population's habitat. Again, it's the same population, so it's the same genes. Introduce new individuals, and those new individuals would have different or new genes transported from other populations. I like this one. Or this one says to sterilize the least fit individuals in the population. Again, we're still talking about the same individuals. So for this one, I'm going to choose C. Let's see what we're supposed to review, guys. This is a super important concept for the test. Keep in mind, energy flows one direction, and that's what we're showing here. Versus matter, and remember, energy is represented by the orange arrows. Excuse me. Matter can be recycled. So I draw for my students some type of a recycling sign here. But this is the most super important concept to remember for the test. Moving on, let's look at number 5. The graph below shows changes in the population size. Excuse me, of 3 species of penguins. I'm going to refer to these as the A penguins, the C penguins, and the G penguins. A, which is going to be right here in red, they need ice as a platform, where the other ones don't. This is the ultimate question. Which of the following explanations is the least likely reason for the trend shown in the graph? Guys, whenever we get to the least likely reason or the one that's not true, I want to make sure I'm looking for the one that's false, maybe not necessarily true. So these are the A penguins, here's the C penguins, and here's the G penguins. All right, the numbers of A penguins are decreasing, that's true, due to global climate change. I don't know that for sure, but possibly, let's just put over here, that's possible. Populations of the chinstrap and gentoo penguins are increasing, both of those are slightly increasing, because they are introduced species, free of predators and competition. And it doesn't really mention anything about that one, so I'm going to lean towards that one. Let's come back to it, okay? Populations of the A penguins are decreasing due to habitat fragmentation. It doesn't say that up here, but we know that human impact does cause can cause habitat fragmentation, breaking up their ecosystem or their living area. And then last one, as the climate of the Arctic changes, the distribution of penguin changes as well. And we do know that there is climate change, which is also a human impact, so that's possible. I'd say all of these three, A, C, and D, are possible because of human impact, versus this one's bringing in something else that's talking about predators and competition, this idea of an introduced species. So this was a challenging one, but I'm going to say B is the most unlikely reason in this case. Guys, what are we supposed to remember here? Keep in mind that the population size can change at a more rapid rate than genetic variation can increase. That's what this is just trying to show us. Ecosystems with little diversity are less resistant to change, and that's going to be a super important to remember for the AP exam. Let's look at number 6. Number 6 says the graph shows change in the number of species in an aquatic ecosystem when this aquatic organism, Pisaster, is present versus when it's absent. Again, I don't know what Pisaster is, but to not get confused, I'm just going to call it Mickey Mouse. So Mickey Mouse is present versus when it's absent, and it looks like the number of species, so the biodiversity, when this is present tends to increase, versus when they take it out of the ecosystem, the number of species really declines rapidly. So it says based on the data, this is most likely what, and I'm going to put this back so we can see it, this Pisaster, is it the dominant species? Remember, dominant means the most abundant, and I don't really see that up here. Is it an invasive species? No, we didn't really talk about that. Let me see if I can scroll down right here. And is it an over-harvested? We're not talking about harvesting them. Guys, the word here is it is a keystone species, but let's review what a keystone species is really quickly. Keystone species, it may not be necessarily the most abundant species, but it tremendously impacts the ecosystem. Oops, this was our penguin one. I need to get out of this one. So excuse me. Keystone species versus a dominant species. Dominant means the most abundant species. Keystone, it's not the most abundant, but it has a huge impact on the ecosystem. I think the thing we take away from that is when the keystone species is removed, the ecosystem usually collapses from there. Let's go ahead and look at the next one. This is just showing us a few, this idea of invasive species. Invasive species are species that are transferred. I like to refer to them as guests that take over the place. So that's a good one to remember too. And here's just a few examples of invasive species. They're guests, they're invited or uninvited, they come into a new ecosystem and they just completely dominate it, they take over. So let's look at number 7 really quickly. Number 7 could be a fast one. Basically, I'm just going to go straight to the graph on this one, and I'm going to come down and look at the question. It says, based on the data, what are the limiting nutrients for this question, for this Mickey Mouse character? And so remember, limiting nutrients, and this one they're going to say, what do we have to analyze? I wanted to do this fairly quickly. If these over here, they're going to have a much higher carbon-14 uptake. Carbon-14, we can see from the graph. So when I look at this, which one is the limiting nutrient? You can see that this one has iron, this one has iron, this one does not have iron, this one does not have iron. This one can be fairly fast. We can say iron is a limiting nutrient. What is a limiting nutrient? It's usually the one that slows the overall production. You have to have it in order to go fast. So if it's not present, it's going to affect the rate of production somehow. Let's look at this one. This one says organisms must exchange matter with the environment to grow, reproduce, maintain organization. Usually, keep in mind, usually it's nitrogen and phosphorus are typically limiting nutrients, but in this example was just a little bit different. All right, let's see if we can't get this one last minute. All right, which of the following statements is incorrectly, so I want to make sure I highlight that this is incorrect, is amongst individuals. Innate behaviors may increase survival rate of an organism, while learned behaviors do not improve overall survival rates. Guys, this is a learned behavior. Remember, innate means you're born with it. You don't have to learn it. But learned behavior, this is like a child learns not to touch a hot stove. And so a child learning not to touch a hot stove would probably be a great example of that child learning to survive. And so this one, to say that learned behaviors do not improve survival outcomes, I say that's immediately, I don't have a whole lot of time, but I'm going to label that one as false. That one must be the one. If you look at the rest of these, all of these are true to an extent. And the last thing on here is our math grid in. All right, I hope that helped.